ticking upwards. So I wonder, maybe should we get underway? Firstly, I'm going to speak very, very briefly. My name is Phelan McLaughlin. I'm the Director for Global Programs in Irish Aid in the Department of Foreign Affairs, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to a very special occasion today. I know we have many fellows joining us from all over Ireland for today's event, and we're hoping that with the lifting of the COVID restrictions, hopefully we'll get to meet you all in person at some stage in the very, very near future. Today is a very special day in the Irish calendar. It's a day that from next year will be a public holiday. It marks the festival of Brigid, of Saint Brigid, and in recent years, it's become an opportunity to celebrate and to reflect on the role of women in Irish society and indeed around the world. And all over the planet, Irish embassies are hosting St. Brigid's Day or Brigid Festival Day events that will be taking place this evening. In particular, it's a moment to reflect on the need to keep pushing for genuine gender equality in our society, something that will only happen if we make it happen. And we're really delighted that Melanie, that Herstory are with us here today. Melanie has been at the forefront of shaping St. Brigid's Day over the last number of years, and I think must take a lot of the credit for the fact that it's now going to become a public holiday from next year. And it'll act as a counterbalance, I think, to our national day, St. Patrick's Day, which will be taking place next month. So today is a day for hearing from women. So on that note, I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to pass over to Laura Harmon from ICOS, who's going to take you through the rest of the event. But welcome to everybody. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and you're very, very welcome, and happy St. Brigid's Day to you all. And I just want to say thanks to Phelan as well for that introduction, and thanks to the department for supporting this event, to Liz and Phelan in particular. And I just want to say a big thanks to Tiana from ICOS for organising this event and putting it together. So I suppose just very briefly, you know, as Phelan mentioned, this is a day to, I suppose, celebrate the women, you know, in our lives, and also celebrate, you know, historical women, mythical women, and change makers, I suppose, across the world, and from countries across the world as well. So today also marks, I suppose, one of four big Celtic festivals in Ireland. I don't know if you would have heard of them. So today would have marked the start, would have been called Imbolc, which marks the start of spring, which obviously coincides with St. Brigid's Day. And then there's three other big festivals. So you have Bealtaine, which is the Irish word for May, the month of May. And that would have, I suppose, marked the beginning of summer. And I suppose, you know, harvest, kind of setting crops and that. And then we had Lunasa, which is the Irish word for August. And that would have marked, I suppose, harvest season and big celebrations with crops that were sown earlier in the year. And then, of course, we have Samhain, which is the Irish word for November. And Samhain, I suppose, originated, it's Halloween basically. So Halloween would have come from the word Samhain, where people celebrated the dead. So those are four big, I suppose, festivals, and Imbolc is one of them, which coincides with Brigid's Day. And as Phelan mentioned, I mean, we already have a bank holiday for St. Patrick's Day to celebrate him. And now we're going to have a public holiday to celebrate St. Brigid. And I think this has been a long time coming. And certainly Melanie Lynch has been a driving force behind this. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Melanie, and we will have a short Q&A afterwards for people if you want to ask Melanie some questions. So hopefully we'll have a good bit of time for that. So Melanie is a social justice entrepreneur and award-winning creative with a passion for justice, equality, and storytelling. She started a degree in mathematics and philosophy at Trinity College Dublin, and then she decided to take a detour and enrolled in art college, leading to a career working for some of the world's best advertising agencies. And then Melanie obviously founded Herstory, which tells stories of women, modern women, historic women, and of course mythic women as well, like I suppose St. Brigid herself. So I'm going to pass you over now to Melanie, and thank you so much for being here today with us. We really appreciate it. I know today is one of your busiest days of the year, so really appreciate that you could join us for this event today, Melanie.
Thank you so much, Laura. No, I really appreciate it too. And I know what it feels like to be an international student because I went to art college in England. So I really feel I suppose, so in tune with the international students in Ireland. And I really hope you're having a wonderful experience of Irish education and integration. And that's the beautiful thing about Ireland now. It's so much more multicultural and diverse. And I think we're a much more thriving, richer society for it. And I also want to share a little insight with Phelim, actually, because credit also to the Department of Foreign Affairs. I'm probably not aware of this, but it was Emily McCormack from the DFA who reached out to me and actually asked, would we consider moving the Herstory Light Festival from Nullaghnaman, which is Women's Little Christmas on the 6th of January, to Brigid's Day, in order for the Irish embassies to be able to participate and light up landmarks around the world, because of course Ireland lights up the world green on St. Patrick's Day. So a little thanks, a very special thanks to the DFA as well for that little nudge, because it did make all the difference. So I'm delighted to be here today. It's a really special day for Ireland, but also you mightn't be aware that actually Brigid was a pan-European goddess. She was celebrated from Turkey to Spain, and actually ancient Europe enjoyed a really strong prehistoric goddess culture. Which we're hoping we're going to reawaken in the years to come. We're working on a beautiful big animation project at the moment, and I'm looking forward to sharing lots of new goddess stories with you in the future over the coming years. But I love the saint and the goddess, and I suppose I'm going to start by sharing some insights about these extraordinary women, these characters. Who were they? It's quite fascinating. The saint lived 1500 years ago, and I suppose it's important to note that sometimes it's very hard to tell where the saint begins and where the goddess ends. It's the stories can at times blur. There's amazing epic legends. We don't know sometimes what's fact and what's true. We do know that Brigid had 3 biographers. Cognitius was one, and Saint Broca was another one. The third biographer is unknown, but they all agreed that she was born 1500 years ago, and she was a woman of a remarkable integrity and charisma. She was an incredible leader as a woman. She co-founded a double monastery with the recluse Conlath, and she convinced him to come out of he had a beautiful, simple monastic lifestyle, quiet lifestyle, and she said, no, we need to found a new abbey in Kildare, and we'll lead the abbey together, side by side, men and women practicing their religion, Christianity, side by side. And this actually wasn't unusual in the early Christian faith, especially in Celtic Ireland as well. These double monasteries weren't a total anomaly. Today, you couldn't imagine the Catholic Church, unfortunately, giving women the opportunity to lead it and to stand on the altar and say mass. But hopefully that day will come again in the future. But it did happen in the past, we know, and she's not the only bishop as well in Europe. There are others too. So I think that this gives us a great moment for, I think, equality and diversity and inclusion, but also to look at our spirituality and our faith, and to rewrite the feminine back into that story too, because all too often with world religions, they focus specifically on the male prophets, or and the women do get forgotten often in the narrative, and we've seen this happen. But I don't think this needs to be the case going forward. I think we are certainly entering into a new era, and I'm very excited about that. So what happened was, we started this beautiful Herstory Light Festival, all because I was meditating one day and reflecting on the fact that Ireland lights up green on St. Patrick's Day. And I thought, wouldn't it be just so beautiful to light up in honour of women? So we started the festival first on Nullaghnaman, and then at the request of the DFA, we moved to Brigid's Day. And it's just been a really powerful moment for, I suppose, honouring the women who've been in the shadows, lost in the darkness, and bringing them into the light, making them visible in the public spaces, and illuminating very iconic buildings across Dublin and all across Ireland indeed. So this is the iconic GPO building, I'm sure you're aware of it. This is the National Museum's Collins Barracks in Dublin. So we have a goddess and a saint. I love both of them. I adore both of them. I think we can learn a lot from both. Of course, a goddess, it wasn't a real person. It's an archetype. And Jungian psychoanalysts would explain, I suppose, the power of archetype in that it's a way to understand our psychology, how the human mind works, and how characters operate within our psyche, and they can help us understand our own personalities and how we can empower ourselves also through these archetypes. So I would be very influenced by bard mythologies who have influenced John Moriarty, John O'Donoghue, a lot of the great Irish philosophers. this idea of Jungian psychology is very empowering, especially understanding our own emotions and these very powerful characters that are part of the collective unconscious, in the words of Jung himself. So Brigid is the triple archetypal goddess, and she's the goddess of water, which is deemed a feminine element, the goddess of fire, the masculine element. So she balances the masculine and feminine energies. And if you look to the east, we call this the Ida and Pingala in the Indian tradition, and in the Tao, it's called the yin and the yang. And this idea that no matter whether you are a man or a woman or non-binary or transgender, you have masculine and feminine energies within you, and you can balance these energies. And I remember we had a beautiful Herstory salon at Trinity College Dublin. The students asked a psychologist to speak, and she taught the students about this insight, about this inner masculine and feminine energy. And the students just said they were so liberated by this idea that just because they're a woman, they could also have these strong masculine tendencies too. And I suppose we're striving towards balance, but sometimes, you know, like for example, today I have to use a lot more of my masculine power and energy for this light show, but then I'll return to my feminine and rebalance myself too. So I thought that really helps me, I suppose, you know, and how you can work with Brigid and the energy of Brigid in terms of understanding yourself, but also the collective. She's also the goddess of art, especially poetry too. And so today we have commissioned our poet in residence to write a very beautiful new poem about Brigid, and she's performing it live all across Kildare. We're doing light shows at 4 iconic local landmarks in Kildare, and you'll hopefully be able to see the finished video by the weekend. So I'm really excited about it. It's a very powerful poem. So she's very much an icon for equality. Like I said, it's that balance of the masculine and feminine. And this is a really gorgeous image of a woman who could also balance her masculine and feminine in Irish society and Irish history. The legendary Countess Markievicz, who was a formidable force during the 1916 Rising, but she was a character. She would pose for photographs with her military stance. So she would have her pistol in her hand, but she would still wear her feather hat. So she went to art college and she understood the power of how to construct an image, and she wouldn't reject her femininity, even though she had this very strong military role to play. She wouldn't reject her femininity either. So she had this brilliant balance within her. And there's also great photos of her in dress up in very fancy ball gowns. And she was a real formidable force, and a woman you can't put in the box, really. I love this insight from Tracy O'Connor, who's one of the Herstory board directors. She said that Brigid she's the bridge. She crosses the threshold between pagan, Christian, winter and spring, water and fire, masculine and feminine. And I think it's really important that we honor the early pre-Christian Irish tradition too. And they were times when, you know, the goddess culture thrived in Ireland. We have many Irish goddesses in our mythology. Actually, 3 of the creation stories of Ireland are all goddess stories. They are the story of Cesar, the story of Boann, and the story of Eru. In fact, Ireland is actually named after a goddess, and so is Europe. Europa was the goddess of Europe. So there's some little insights for you about goddess culture. And you can go on the Herstory website and read all these stories about the mythic women and the historic women too. But it's really important, I think, to reclaim these early goddess archetypes. This is a beautiful moment. We illuminated Titanic Museum in Belfast in honor of the astrophysicist Dame Jocelyn Bell Burnell. She's from Northern Ireland. She's a legendary contemporary scientist. And a great quote from Dr. Maureen Inulon, who's one of the co-founders of Bard Mythologies. And she talks about the goddess and why it's important. And like I said, that it's about the collective unconsciousness and really understanding that we have all of these elements within us. And that they can be very powerful when we work with these archetypes and these what they mean, their attributes, their energies. And that's what the 1916 Riser leaders did, you know. They were working with the very powerful Cullen archetype. There's a beautiful moment in Bard Mythologies and where Sandy Dunlop, he ended the workshop with a brilliant cliffhanger. He said, if 100 years ago Ireland needed the warrior Cullen archetype, who is the new masculine archetype that we need? Because in Ireland we don't need a warrior anymore. We're a pacifist, you know, we're a peaceful country. So I thought that was a brilliant question to ask, and we can always invent new archetypes too, and to really explore this as a theme through storytelling, through poetry, and through psychology. And this is a lovely insight about Brigid as well, in that she's an all-Ireland, all-island icon. Brigid was an Ulster goddess because north of the Boyne was Ulster in ancient times. And so it was wonderful actually to travel up to Northern Ireland for the last few years during the light show. And we've been lighting up Ulster Museum, Titanic Museum. And there was a very powerful moment actually in 2020 where we were granted permission to light Belfast City Hall in honour of the peace heroines of Northern Ireland. And it just so happened that Brigid's Day coincided with Brexit weekend. And that meant that the tensions, I suppose, and the sensitivities in the north were heightened, and there was a great sense of uncertainty about the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement and how Brexit would affect this hard-won peace, and one of the greatest peace stories in the world. Really, it's a testament to the people of Northern Ireland. And so we all came together at Belfast City Hall with the peace heroines there present, and the students from all across Ulster who created new portraits of the peace heroines, and they were illuminating the buildings. And it was just a beautiful moment of solidarity and a refocusing on peace and what really mattered, and a reaffirming of those values of the Good Friday Agreement. And I think for me, that's one of my favorite moments of the Herstory Light Festival. I think that's the power of light as well, in that it's so healing when we illuminate, when we acknowledge, when we come together and we celebrate, that it can create great transformation. And I'm delighted to say that Department of Foreign Affairs recently commissioned Herstory to create the first ever exhibition with the peace heroines of Northern Ireland. And we're creating this exhibition at the moment with the National Museums Northern Ireland, and hoping to launch on the International Day of Peace this year on the 21st of September. So that's a lovely evolution of that light show. And I suppose we're carrying the flame forward into the future. And I'm really excited to see how that project evolves, because many of the women are working together today for peace. And that's I suppose what Brigid was all about. She was a peacemaker too, you know, and a woman of incredible integrity who could bring people together across the divides. She had a great sense of conviction. And she had this from a very early age as well. We know that, you know, even as young as 10 years old, she ruffled many feathers, actually, including her parents. She would take their possessions, their belongings, and she would give them away to the poor. So she had that real, I suppose, that vocation for humanitarian acts. And also, she was an environmentalist too. She really believed in the care of animals and nature. So definitely an icon for our times, I think. Even though she lived 1500 years ago, I feel Ireland is still catching up with this wonderful woman. So like I said, I think that we need to talk about the pan-European goddess too, because of the fact that she was celebrated all across Europe. I'm actually receiving emails in from Sweden, from France, from Holland at the moment, from our connections there with the Irish diaspora, saying we have actually heard recently about the local celebrations for Brigid. It's really interesting, different spellings of her name, but it is Brigid the goddess. And so it's wonderful to hear that that's rising across Europe. And I really think this could become a pan-European day. I think we do need a pan-European day because we need to, I suppose, reunite and to reaffirm our commitment to the values of the EU, which it's in some ways, when I look back on my education at school, it wasn't framed in the context of, I think the most powerful fact about the EU is it's one of the greatest peace projects in modern history. Europe has enjoyed its longest period of peace in centuries, thanks to the EU. And so when we live in an era of Brexit, when there's so much division, you can see the rise of the far right. I think it's really important that we come together and to celebrate this monumental achievement. And Brigid being the bridge of those worlds. Maybe it's not Brigid's Day, maybe it's not, EU Day, I don't know, but I think that's maybe, and hopefully the DFA are listening, I think it could be a really special moment for the EU too. So the Light Festival started, and I have to be honest, the trigger initially was anger. I discovered all of these women's stories that I was never told about in school, and unfortunately the curriculum hasn't really changed much in Ireland yet. We're hoping to see that day soon, but there's only a handful of women in the school curriculum. When I was a kid, I could name 5 women, and I never thought much of it at the time, but it was when I sat down with the Royal Irish Academy and they said, look, we've got something to tell you. We've counted the number of women in the Dictionary of Irish Biography, and there's over 1,000 women's biographies already there. and there's countless names missing. And I thought, oh my God, I mean, I was so inspired and fascinated, but I'll have to be honest, I was a little bit enraged too. So I had to find a healthy expression for this anger, because I didn't want to become an angry feminist. So I had to really rethink my relationship to anger, and for it to find a healthy expression, because we're looking for equality. Now, equality is a state of harmony, but anger is fundamentally divisive. So it had to find a way to manifest that was inclusive, celebratory, positive, uplifting. And that's why I started the light show, because it was this moment of celebration and of this illumination of positivity. And I'm delighted to say that Herstory has as many godfathers as godmothers. It's been amazing, the support that we've received from men and women. So these are some pictures, I suppose, of the early inspirations behind it. And this is Eru, the founding goddess of Ireland, illuminated on Ishnok, which is one of the sacred, ancient sacred sites of Ireland, where all the kings of Ireland used to converge together to discuss politics, etc. And I've shown you some of these pictures now. This is Brigid. This is very special, actually. This is Saint Brigid's Cathedral in Kildare, where she founded her abbey. This is an image by Courtney Davis, Transition. He creates beautiful sacred art. This is Ninja Brigid by Sean Brannigan, Storyboard Workshop. It's lots of fun. This is Mary Magdalene on the Magdalene Laundry. So we do a lot of healing work as well, with helping to heal the trauma of Irish history too. And I think I have to say, I'm so proud to be Irish, and that we are very brave as a people, as a nation, when we come to face our trauma. We do it with such courage and such integrity and honesty. And we've seen that with the big referendums in the last decade, the referendum for marriage equality and repeal the eighth. And this is a lovely opportunity as well. I was involved in the Stand for Truth campaign to help heal the heartbreak of the Magdalene laundries. And I'll share some insights about the Mother and Baby Home project shortly too. So this is a lovely moment actually as well. Amy DeVroon lighting up Dublin, and the League of Heroines was created by her husband actually. It's an amazing manga art of 6 Irish heroines from history. Brigid is the one on the bottom right there. And Amy actually wrote a play about Lady Mary Heath called ICU, and the play tells the story of Ireland's world famous record-breaking aviatrix. She was the first person in the world to fly the length of Africa, and she performed this feat in an open air cockpit 2 years before Amelia Earhart's very famous transatlantic crossing. So she was the original Queen of the Skies, Our Lady Mary Heath. And we produced an amazing documentary series with RTE 2 years ago, and there was an episode dedicated to her story, which is my favorite. She's a real character, Our Lady Mary Heath. So you can't watch the episode at the moment, but you can read her story on our website as well. So yeah, sometimes we do some really beautiful, I suppose, almost immersive art performances too when we do our light shows. These are shots of caves in Wicklow that were illuminated for Brigid's Day. We are about to edit this footage now for the big national holiday, so we'll have to wait and see. This is one of our favorite moments actually. Nana Bridie was nominated by her granddaughter for the RTE Junior Who's Your Heroine project, and it was so special because all her family came along, all of her siblings and her children and her great-grandchildren and her grandchildren. They all turned up on the night to see their grandmother and to honor her illuminated on the GPO. So I think that's what her story is all about as well. It's a complete democracy of representation. That's what equality is. It's not just about the big famous names too. And that's why we always run an open call for Brigid's Day to invite the public to share the stories of the women who I suppose who are close to their heart and who they want to honor. It's really important. So her story is a movement. It's for the people and it's by the people. And this is the projector that we illuminate with. I give it a hug at the end of every night. It takes 4 people to lift onto the roof. Normally 1 guy and 3 women, but we can do it. It's great fun. This is Ifra Ahmed. She is an Irish Somali FGM activist. And she's only my age, and already a feature film has been made about her story, A Girl from Mogadishu. It's an incredibly powerful film. I'd all highly recommend you watch it. And that's one of my, I suppose, the perks of my job, is I get to sit down and spend time with these inspirational activists, and to hear their stories and their honesty and their integrity. And I suppose we all fuel each other's fire. It's been a really heartwarming experience to connect with them all. So here's another great aviator, Lillian Bland. She was the first woman in the world to design, build and fly her own aircraft. She performed this feat on Carmody Hill in County Antrim, and she named her airplane the Mayfly because she didn't know whether it would fly or not, and it flew. So she was Lillian Not So Bland, great character. This is Ulster Museum lighting up. Beautiful illuminations in Ayr Square for the Mistlor Festival. We often do a partnership with them. Ireland's first nomadic peoples festival, which is really lovely to tell the stories of the Irish traveller and community and the Sami people of Europe and the Romani people. And we're doing another lovely light show with them this October for the next festival. This was a very powerful moment, actually. I vividly remember the catharsis of this light show. We did a partnership with the Everyone Project and the trans community in Ireland. They said, will you illuminate Irish landmarks in honour of trans women and non-binary femfolk? And we did, and it was so healing, because they are a community within Irish society who often don't get represented in national media and in popular culture indeed. And so there was this very powerful moment where we started the light show in Collins Barracks, and they specifically had wanted to do the light show there, and it's in a very, I suppose, safe enclosed courtyard space. And I had a moment of spontaneity because I knew we were going on later that night to light up the GPO with images of Brigid, and I said to them, look, I know we're all together in the courtyard, but you're still hidden, and the public, they can't see you. And so I said, would you like us to light your portrait in the GPO? So we all walked up together. It was like a big pilgrimage, and we all came up together and we watched this light show. And yeah, there were a lot of tears and cheers, and it was a very powerful moment, really, really healing. This is Sarah Phillips, the CEO of TENI, the trans organisation in Ireland, national trans organisation, lighting up Collins Barracks. Brigid. Oh, that's Margaret again. How did she get it again? You see, you just can't put her down. She's a hoot like that. This is Safumi. She is a biochemist graduate from UCD and an alumni of Coláiste Fríde Clontácan. And Fatan Al-Tamini, who's a dear friend of mine, the chair of the Irish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. So we do peace work as well with the Israeli and Palestinian activists on the ground. We released the Parallel Peace Project. Actually, it launched on the first day of ceasefire in Gaza back in May, and it was a very, I suppose, turbulent moment to be working with the activists on the ground there, but knowing that it was the right thing to do, and that the work really helped to give, I suppose, courage to the women and the children on the ground who we were co-creating the project with, to give them a sense of, I suppose, that they were being heard and listened, and they could really feel the support from Ireland actually in this moment. They were very aware of the marches that were happening in all the cities across Ireland and the solidarity that was there. So Fatan she's a really wonderful person. Oh my gosh, sorry, now these images are popping up twice. This is Mo Molam from the peace process, an absolute legend of the Northern Ireland peace process. And here she is lighting up Belfast City Hall 2 years ago. Such a special moment. And then last year what we did was we worked with the victims and survivors of the mother and baby homes, and we illuminated landmarks across Ireland in honour of them and their families, and we projected the names of the babies who died from Vesper Mother and Baby Home here onto Sean Ross Abbey. And it was a very, very healing moment, because from talking to the survivors, the greatest fear is that they'll be forgotten from history. And so to see their names illuminated and remembered, they said it was a big moment for them. And for one woman, actually said she could never cry. She couldn't process the grief and trauma of what she'd experienced. But when she saw the Herstory light show, she cried for the first time. So it was a beautiful release and healing for her. This is Athlone Castle, lighting up with the names of the babies who died. And so that's why I suppose Herstory can come in, is to help heal those traumas, because we as a nation we really do want to heal those traumas. And I remember talking to a lot of people, the public at the time, and so many said, we don't know how to process this particular wound because it was the mother wound, and we all have mothers. We all came from a mother. And so I suppose it's almost a trauma at the very heart of what it means to be human. And that was a gift, I suppose, that the Herstory Light was, that we could go into this deep wound and help heal it. So we produced a beautiful, beautiful film, and women dressed in white. And we projected the names of the babies and the photos of the babies and the women onto the women dressed in white. It's just to honor and acknowledge them. This is Galway City Museum lighting up with the women, some of the survivors. And this is Catherine Corliss, the historian and activist she spearheaded the campaign for justice. So it's really amazing. And so these are some of the images that we commissioned for the light show too. So it was Reclaiming the Mother archetype, created by Anya O'Brien and Miriam Riand in County Clare. This is Mother Creation. Nadine Reid embodying the Black Madonna. I think it's going to play now. So this is the film I just played for you.
Go the Brigid on money leren on when legach tiri mol mish galeri Loren gal malaino a seilje van de tira kion eroveren kion man ermina Tegen jere diandov liaralene jera acherlo lebrida garduin aracheren Gamal da brida on money leren on when legach tiri molamish galeri
That's the power of the light and the power of
Go
Brigid, because she is the goddess and the saint of healing. And so this year we chose a theme of student power. The Irish Second Level Student Union reached out to us. Saoirse Exton is the equality officer there, and she said, would you do a partnership to empower the voices of students? And of course we said yes. So it's been an amazing process learning about student activists from Ireland, all around the world actually. And last night we lit up Trinity College Dublin and the GPO with 30 student activists, and the portraits were created by NCAD and Closh Dulig. I'm waiting to receive all the photographs at the moment, so I don't have them right now, but if you want to go and follow the Twitter thread, the Herstory Twitter thread and Instagram, we're Herstory Ireland, you can see all the beautiful illuminations. You can go on our website as well and read the stories of the student activists too. So this was a really wonderful project to be involved in, and great support from the Provost of Trinity College and the senior management there. It's our first time to be granted permission to light up Trinity, which is wonderful. Actually, I'm an alumni of that university, so it's a special moment actually to see the light show, and it'll be featured on RTE News tonight as well. They filmed the light show last night. So yeah, so I suppose just reflecting on your generation, I'm in awe. I've never, from all my historical research, I've never seen a generation like this rise up in history. You're the first to rise up on this scale worldwide. It's never happened before. You are a very powerful, influential generation, and do not underestimate your power and your influence. We're all listening. It's really incredible. And I suppose sparked by the power of this young girl, Greta Thunberg, to think that the students around the world are marching every Friday for climate action. And we know from the 1916 rising leaders and the women that it was the beginning of their activism. So once you become an activist, there's no going back. And I remember sitting down with Dr. Mary McAuliffe from UCD, and she told me about the 1916 rising women and what they went on to achieve in other areas, whether it be trade unionism, women's rights, education, children's rights. So yeah, the fight for independence is just the beginning, which is very exciting. So I am in awe. I take a bow to all of your generation, really inspired. It's amazing. Like my little sisters were at their first marches. They're now 7 and 9. They were 3 and 5 years old when they went to their first march. I was in my 20s by the time I went to my first march, so it's really amazing. I think I'll just end by, I'm going to share a story with you about an experience I had recently. I'm actually in Indonesia at the moment. I've been researching a huge new project that we're developing for British Day actually next year in the coming years. And it tells the stories of Indigenous cultures around the world. And I journeyed into the heart of the Borneo rainforests to learn from the Dayak tribe. They are a people that have been living in perfect harmony with nature for millennia. They have a very beautiful philosophy and spirituality that's deeply rooted in a reverence for the earth and the land. And I wanted to witness this because this is our Irish heritage. Going not so far back now, my great grandparents would have been farmers and they would have lived from the land. And there were times when there was no pesticides or plastic packaging or no preservatives in food. It was all very natural, very real, very fresh. I think they were all the healthier for it too. So it was a really profound experience. We drove for 6 hours through palm oil plantations, dispersed with a few pockets of surviving rainforest. Unfortunately, 50% of the Borneo rainforest has been cut down now to plant palm oil. But I know the Indonesian government are trying to rectify this because of the climate crisis at hand. They're the baby lungs of the world. It's called the baby Amazon, actually, the Borneo rainforest. So we drove for 6 hours through the plantations and then 6 hours up a river in a boat into the wilds of original rainforest. And I've never breathed air so fresh and pristine in my life. It was a very special experience to be in the land with the orangutans, to know they were there and you're their neighbors, and honestly not needing to see them. I was very happy not to see them, just to know you're there walking in their land and eating their favorite fruit for breakfast. And so I got to spend time with some very visionary, brilliant young education activists from Borneo. Daisy on the left is only 25 years old, and already she has founded 5 Indigenous primary schools, empowering 149 children with the wisdom and traditions of the Dayak culture, because it is at risk of dying out. Modernization is a threat, but she also sees the positives too, and she's finding a balance between both worlds. She's a very wonderful person. She's equally respected by the elders and adored by the children. Her sister, Dewi, is on the right. She's only 22 years old. She's just graduated cum laude from university. She was the first person from her tribe to record in written form the stories of Dayak women. And so unusually, when you write a thesis, they say on average 7 people will read a PhD thesis. But Dewi has actually been receiving many requests from people to get a copy of her thesis. So we're hoping to get it published publicly, because it is a very timely timely book. And so it was amazing to spend time with this family. I lived with them for a few days, and then we traveled together. And that's their mum on the right. She's she's a very nurturing, caring, loving mother. They also have a younger sister, Delhi, who's currently studying tourism in Jakarta, and she is one of the most respected and renowned sape instrument players in Indonesia. She's got thousands of followers on Instagram and on Facebook. And I think she's 20 years old already. So they're really, really visionary. And the younger brother is only 16 years old, and he is a gifted filmmaker, and he films all their expeditions and their projects. And so they're a really amazing team. So this is Daisy here, and it was very special. I was really honored to spend time with her, and I'm looking forward to bringing her hopefully to Ireland next year. We've been in contact with the Irish Embassy in Indonesia, and the ambassador there is keen to do a project in collaboration with these Dayak sisters, because I think for us as being Irish, it's that remembrance of who we were as a people and how we lived so closely to the land, and we still have a very strong connection to the land in Ireland and a reverence for it too. But I think there are some aspects we've lost, and I think spending time with this culture for me was a reawakening, a remembering. And so Daisy, she says their philosophy is that nature is their school and everybody is a teacher, including the students. So there's no hierarchy between teacher and student or between elder and child within their culture. It's very democratic. Men and women are equal. They follow a timeless tradition whereby the new leader of the tribe is voted through a democratic process. And it can be a woman or a man. And so you'll often find that with Indigenous cultures where there is a huge respect and reverence for Mother Earth, the women are treated equally too. It's quite symbiotic. And I think you can see, unfortunately, what's happened in the West is that the influence of certain religions and their almost disrespect to the feminine has meant that Mother Earth has also suffered too. So when we care for the earth, we care for the feminine, we care for each other, and everybody thrives, including the men, I think too, because we're all allowed to be a little bit more feminine then. And so these are some portraits by David Metcalf, the Indigenous ambassador from New Zealand, who was our guide, and he took these photos of the young children. I spent a week with these kids in Borneo, and they are so empowered by the work of Daisy and her sisters. They are so confident and interactive, and they freely give hugs to strangers. She's really brought them out of their shell, because their education system is not that engaging. It's a much more traditional system than say what we would have in Ireland, and so the children wouldn't be confident at public speaking, or if you ask them a question, they wouldn't want to normally respond. But because of Daisy's interactive approach, these children are absolutely thriving. You could see that now. We went to the villages where Daisy had only visited a few times. The children weren't so confident yet, but the children that she'd spent years with were just really, really thriving young people. And so this is, I think, a great example of what happens when you empower a family of activists and educators. It can transform not just one community, but many communities. And she's only beginning. She wants to found the first international high school for Indigenous cultures in Borneo, and there's no stopping her at 25. So these are really beautiful photos. And so I think there's a lot we can learn from each other, and these Indigenous cultures is for me, it's that remembering of how to really be human, and in John Moriarty's words, how to walk beautifully on the land again. And I think in the West, in the name of civilization and progress, we've lost some of the best parts of our humanity and that connection to the earth, which is ultimately healing and transformative. This is Delhi, the youngest sister here. She's playing the sape. It's a very beautiful instrument. It's the instrument of healing in their culture. And there were great moments. We would go on expeditions through the jungle, and Daisy would come alive and she would point to one particular tree, and she would say, well, this is the tree now for the biofuel. And she said, we don't need to cut down the tree. All we need to do is just tap a little hole in it, and we draw the sap, and we can use this then to light fires, and we can use it to power the engines of our boats. And then she'd point to another tree, and she'd say, well, this tree now, this is how we can make natural soaps. so we don't need to be using harmful ingredients. And then of course with soap, of course, it gets into the water system then, and it poisons the fish. And so she's got this wonderful knowledge of the medicinal plants and all the different uses of nature, but in a really symbiotic way. And they have this belief as well that they only take every day from the rainforest what they need, not what they want. And in their philosophy, they will always leave a piece of fruit behind for the other creatures that live there. They'll never take every last piece of fruit, which I think is a lovely symbiotic way of living with your environment and acknowledging that we're not the only creatures on this planet, even though sometimes we act like we are the only creatures. This is little Elise. She is 12 years old and she's a young youth activist, and she was training the children in the villages that we visited. She was teaching them all the traditional music and dance. So already at 12 years age, she's a very vibrant young leader. This is little Nata. So one morning we went foraging for our breakfast at sunrise. You get up at the crack of dawn. There's no food in the cupboards. They don't have any food in the cupboards there because everything's caught fresh in the morning. You go down and you get your breakfast wild and fresh from the jungle. So it's really good for your body. I mean, my health was amazing after a week of this food. And so the girls were brilliant. They were keeping their eyes peeled. We were going up the boat looking for, delicious breakfast. And they got all excited. They spotted something particularly yummy. And they exclaimed to me, they said, "This is our supermarket and it's all free." And so off they scurried off up the riverbank, and they came back and they had their hands full with delicious greens and vegetables and wild fruits that they found. So women all preparing breakfast together. And I think about it, like my great-grandparents would have lived like this off the land. So we haven't lost it. It's still possible. And my dad, like, even though he works in medical technology and, very much in, I suppose, that Western side of the world, he has his organic garden at home, and he goes out and he picks his breakfast fresh every morning. So I think we are remembering, and we're returning to this way of life, which is heartwarming to see. And I saw a beautiful shift in people's behavior as well. During the pandemic, people were growing their own food, their own vegetables and fruit. And I delighted every time I went to the local gardening centre in Wicklow. They would give me the update and how well the sales were going. They said never before have they had sales like this. And I think that's one of the great gifts of the pandemic, is that we were returning to nature and returning to becoming sustainable again. So this is the beautiful fresh food, and they just catch a little bit of fish. And it's mainly a plant-based diet, and a bit of fish, and it's delicious. They make really delicious sauces as well with the fruit and veg. So there you go. So that, I suppose, is my final maxim from Steve Jobs. You can't join the dots looking forwards, only looking backwards. So somehow you have to trust that somehow in the future that your dots will join up. And that's been my experience with my career, that I worked in advertising, but I'm not, I wouldn't be capitalist by nature. I'm naturally an activist. And so I was struggling with selling products that I didn't really believe in and fueling consumerism, when really we should be refocusing what matters. And I then took those advertising skills, those communication skills, I honed them, and then I plugged them into Herstory. And so it's been a blessing. And I never thought that, my training in advertising could be so useful in other areas, but it's possible that, along your path, in your careers, in your future, nothing was ever lost, nothing is ever wasted. I studied maths and philosophy for a year in Trinity. I still use my philosophy studies when I'm writing funding applications. It's still useful. My mathematics I always adore, because I have to problem solve every day. As an entrepreneur, you have to. So that's, I suppose, a little guiding maxim for the future, is to trust. As students, you mightn't 100% know who you are, what you want to be in the future, but just trust it along the path, that you'll just be shown the next little piece of the puzzle. As a child, I grew up, I loved the National Geographic. My father had a subscription. It was a huge influence on me. that's how I learned what it meant to be a woman. And I've always dreamed about working with Indigenous cultures, and now I can do it, and it's part of Herstory. So yeah, that's the end of my talk. Shall we move on to the Q&A? How's that sound?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I just want to say thanks so much, Melanie, for that. I think that was extremely inspiring and so much food for thought as well. Wow. And just, I think, reflecting on your experience with Indigenous cultures as well, and how close they are to the land, and the equality between men and women that they have. I think in the consumerist world we kind of live in today, we have kind of forgotten a lot of that. So I think it's really important to reflect. And just for me as well, I mean, your insight into, I suppose, the different gods. I mean, I had forgotten that Ireland was named after the god Eru, and obviously Europe after Europa. So I think we've forgotten a lot of that history. And just, I think the broad spectrum that you showcase in terms of activists and political leaders and students. I know we had a lot of comments coming in on the chat just about the art and the amazing, light shows, and just people really, I think, really impressed by your presentation and the work that you're doing. And I suppose I just wanted to say, obviously, people can look at the Herstory website if they want to find out more information. I'll certainly be checking it out to learn more myself. And of course, watch the news later as well. It'll be great to see the light show featured on the RT News this evening. So just, we have time for a couple of questions here. So I'll just see what's coming through. So one question was, so how do you think this great history is integrated into the Irish education curriculum to inform future generations? So I don't know, is it, or what's your opinion on that, Melanie?
This actually hasn't happened yet, unfortunately. So, but that day will come. It's not an easy process. I mean, think credit to the Department of Education. It's not an easy process to change the curriculum. It could take, a decade for one particular subject to be fully revised and rewritten. So in the meantime, that's why we created all the Herstory resources in a format that the teachers could easily integrate it into the school curriculum. But I know from talking to the equality officer at the ISSU that she said that she couldn't name a single woman on the science curriculum at the junior cert level, which is a real shame, especially when there's a big focus on getting women in STEM. And that she could name, I think, 3 women from the history curriculum. So yeah, so we have a long way to go. I think the English literature curriculum is better, and the Irish language curriculum, I've heard, is better too. They're adding more contemporary female voices and writers, but in terms of the formal history curriculum, but we're talking about really rethinking history and how it's taught, because the dominant narratives that have, I suppose, they've defined history, have focused on often civil war and colonialism is a huge theme, and politics between different countries and dynamics, and they're the huge big narratives of, you could say, the patriarchy, or you could say the domination system. I don't like to put a gender on it at this stage, but I think it's very important to highlight the fact that men and women have suffered equally as much during the patriarchy. And I know many feminists would be too happy with me saying this, but I think it's very important to highlight that. As a woman, I can't imagine being trained to kill, being conscripted against my will and forced to kill another human being. And as a woman, this is something that we don't have to worry about. It's never within our radar. We're not expected of it. And I think that we need to reframe how we think about history in the past, but what narratives we think are important to. Do the big wars really need to get all that much focus? If you think about what's happening in the world today, there's a lot of challenge, there is conflict, and there's serious issues with climate action too, and also there's a lot of positive transformation and change. And would that be captured in the living history of this moment? Would we still only focus on the negative narratives? There has to be a bit more of a balance. I think there needs to be a reshift. And when you write the women into the narrative, they naturally bring that balance, because the women want to come in and they want to transform and heal and create progress and transformation. And there are the men who then support that process with the women too. So that's quite a radical thought now for sharing now today, but I really feel strongly about that we need to rethink what we value in the dominant historical narratives.
Absolutely. I think and a lot of work to be done on the curriculum here for sure. Just a few more questions here. So what made Saint Brigid rise from, I suppose, humble beginnings to a celebrated saint in Ireland? So and I suppose a follow-up kind of question to that was, what major qualities did Saint Brigid have? So I suppose we could take those two questions.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if she ever had humble beginnings. I mean, she was a goddess and she was celebrated all across Europe. She had a huge reign of influence. How to answer that question? I think it's really important going forward, and we're seeing this now already, is there's a bit of division in who is the saint and who is the goddess and who we should be focusing on. I think we could lose the magic of the Brigid's Day and the honouring of the feminine if it becomes divisive. We've had conversations in the last week with certain institutions, and there is now that it's the new national holiday, it's changing, so that can be challenging. But I think it's really important to focus on the fact that she was the bridge between worlds, between Christian and pagan, between masculine and feminine, and spring and winter, the darkness and the light. The qualities that I most adore about Brigid is her, I think, burning sense of justice for the poor and for animals. And I just love that even as a 10-year-old, she would go into her mother's butter parlour and she'd steal the butter and give it away to the poor. And there's a legend that she stole her father's sword as well and gave it away for money so she could feed the poor too. So there's lots of great legends about her great acts of charity. And I think the other aspect of the saint that I really adore is this idea of equal Christianity, and that she co-founded this monastery equally with a man, and they are buried equally. They were originally buried equally under the altar, one on the left, one on the right. And that the women and men practice equally, and there was no hierarchy with the priest talking down to the congregation, and that a woman was not allowed to be a priest. I personally don't agree with it. My two grandmothers who are devout Catholics who think that women should be priests. Most people in Ireland do. I think that there was a poll recently, I think over 70% of the public said they would like to see female priests. I think it's the 21st century. I'd love to think that the Catholic Church would evolve. I think we're at risk of losing our spirituality in Ireland, and there's a huge amount of pain and trauma in that loss. And I think you could really see that during the pandemic, and the people were really looking for that spirituality too, and maybe they found it in nature, and that's wonderful too. And in some ways that's going back to our really original roots. So yeah, there's a bit of, I think there's some contention around the saint because she was a saint, but she's like, for me, she's the ultimate saint in that she defies a lot of the rules. She did, and 1500 years ago, and we're still catching up with her, and the Catholic Church are still catching up with her. And I think that's a great icon for our times, because we need progress and we need change, and people need spirituality in these times. It really helps us. So they're my thoughts. Quite a sensitive thing to talk about. Yeah,
I think we need to spread the message far and wide anyway about the qualities of Brigid and across the world. Just another question we had was, I suppose, are there any particular places that you'd really like to bring the light show to, or any artists that you really want to work with?
Well, it's always an open call to students. You know, I've said it to the students at NCAD, Coláiste, the ISSU, you tell us what you're passionate about, what, you know, keeps you up late at night, what are you worried about, what do we need to focus on as a society? Come to us and we'll make it happen. And if you've got student artists or professional artists that you want to see on the illuminations, get in touch. You know, that's what Sarah Exon did. She reached out to us and said, can we make this light show happen? And it's on the RT News tonight, so we made it happen. And that's really important, that it's super inclusive that way. So my favorite locations, we do have a pitch at the moment to the Sydney Opera House to light up for Brigid's Day next year. I also would love to light up the pyramids in Egypt. The Irish ambassador to Egypt, I met him at the Ivy Cultural Exchange, and he did say to me we could make it happen, because we are making an animation, and it does include a goddess from Australia and from from New Zealand and from Egypt, but I'm not saying any more. There's lots more in it, but it's just a little sneak peek of what's coming next year. So there's some of my favorite sites. Uluru as well, the sacred site of the Aboriginal people, really special. I've always had a dream to light up in Kenya as well. I have a really strong connection with the Maasai and the Samburu tribes in Kenya. So they're hopefully going to be featured in the animation project too. But I'd love your thoughts and your ideas. We haven't lit up Leinster House yet. We're talking hopefully to light up next year at the Irish Parliament building for the big Brigid's Day national holiday. So fingers crossed that can happen. That's the last big building in Ireland. And Newgrange, we haven't lit up Newgrange yet. I'd love to see Brigid like popping out, flying out of Newgrange. That'd be great fun. Yeah, some dreams to share. Yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic, and I've no doubt you'll make it happen. So I think we're probably done with the questions, but I just wanted to again just commend the amazing work that you're doing. I think it was absolutely fascinating, and as I say, there's loads of comments coming in on the chat about how inspiring that it was, and really I'm excited, I think, as well to see how, I suppose, Brigid's Day progresses now that it'll be a bank holiday, and hopefully we can make it as big or bigger than St. Patrick's Day across the world. So I think it'll be a really important kind of landmark.
Oops. Oh, you frozen me there. Can you hear me okay?
And for campaigning, a fascinating talk, and the recording is available. We will be sending it around to the attendees as well, if they want to watch that back. I think I might have cut out there, did I? Apologies if I did.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Melanie. I really, really appreciate it. And just thanks as well to the department, and obviously to the ICOS team and Tiana for organising, and for all the attendees here as well. I'm sure if you have any further questions or anything, you can send them on to us in ICOS. Best of luck now with the rest of your day, and we'll be tuning into the news later to keep an eye on it. I'm sure you're very busy.
Yeah, it's flat out. I'm afraid to check my emails, but we're all on top of it anyway.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. We really, really appreciate it.
Like for me, like it's about the students, it's about the young people, and that's the theme for this year. This is you guys, it's your voice, and you are powerful as a generation, and never forget that. And if the world feels overwhelming and you look at the news and you go, I can't, how can we do it? You can. You are an amazing generation. You have to rise up all together, but you're doing it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Melanie. Thanks, everybody.